Well, we may have finally found the supposed dead voters that were voting. Trump thinks one of them voted for him. Trump even more confused and struggling cognitively than we thought. Author Ramin Setoodeh explained last night on CNN that years ago, he already had questions about what was happening with Donald Trump's brain. For example, he says Donald Trump was regularly confused during their interviews. And one example he gave was that Trump insisted confidently that the late Joan Rivers voted for him for president in 2016. There's only one problem with that, which is that Joan Rivers passed away in 2014. And yet this did not stop confused Trump from insisting, no, she voted for me. She did. Listen to Ramin Setoodeh explain it to CNN's Caitlin Collins. This is genuinely serious and scary stuff.
Can we just first start off about your sit downs with Trump 6 times after he left the White House, which, is such a different period thinking about what's happening in Virginia tonight and seeing his grip on the Republican Party. What was he like? What did you observe from him when you sat down with him?
So I interviewed Donald Trump more than any other journalist since he's left the White House. We started in May 2021, and that report you just talked about meandering and confusing is right. He goes from one story to the next. He struggles with the chronology of events. He seems very upset that he wasn't respected by certain celebrities in the White House, and then he'd go to a story about The Apprentice. So as you know, Caitlin, it's very challenging to interview Donald Trump and to go toe-to-toe with him, but there was some cognitive questions about where he was and what he was thinking, and he would from time to time become confused.
Because you wrote at one point about Joan Rivers, him telling you that she voted for him in 2016, I believe, even though...
He confidently told me and declared that Joan Rivers voted for him when he ran for president, and Joan Rivers died in 2014. Joan Rivers died in 2014, so she would not have been able to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, and because you talked about his memory, you wrote that, on some days I have the feeling he has no idea who he's even talking to, that he actually forgot or didn't remember that the two of you had spoken at your first sit-down interview.
Right, so my first sit-down was in May. He wasn't doing a lot of interviews, and then we sat down again towards the end of the summer, and when I sat down, there was a very blank expression on his face, so I asked, do you remember when we spoke recently? And he said, no, I have no memory of that. And he couldn't recall. He said it was a long time ago, and then we had to start from scratch. So the interview started from square one, where he started telling me the same exact stories that I heard in our first interview.
Now, I know that there are people who are going to, let's get back to the Joan Rivers thing in a second. There are people who will hear this and they'll say, Trump's such a busy guy. He's a narcissist. It's not a big deal that he didn't remember ever having met Ramin Setoodeh or having done an hour interview with him. That doesn't really make any sense. And even as someone as narcissistic and high profile as Trump, if you're doing a series of 6 extensive sit-down interviews in your home with the same journalist, there's not really a reasonable explanation for why you would forget about that from May to August, for example. It just doesn't make sense. Now, on insisting that Joan Rivers voted for him, despite the fact that she was dead at the time of the 2016 election, that's very, very concerning. And unfortunately, and this isn't funny, we just can't really have someone in power who is compromised in this way. At another point, it's so sad. Trump said to Setoodeh, I've got to go upstairs and deal with Afghanistan. He wasn't president at the time, and he actually referred to it as the Afghanistan. Incredible.
Your biggest takeaways from sitting down with him, right after he left the White House, when his political power is probably the lowest it's been since 2015, and how he reflected on when he was hosting The Apprentice, and the ratings were soaring in that first season, and just kind of what that looked like for him.
He was very deflated. He was conflicted. He was angry about the way in which the press had treated him. He still believed that he won the election. And he was happiest when he talked to me about hosting The Apprentice. It was the thing that brought him the most joy. We watched clips of the show together. We watched the theme song, and he really lit up. He watched his firing of Omarosa. And then he would talk about what he did at the White House, and he would become gloomy and resentful and unhappy and refer to Afghanistan and Joe Biden. But he also seemed to think that he still had some foreign policy powers. And there was one day where he told me he needed to go upstairs to deal with Afghanistan, even though he clearly didn't.
He told you that while you were interviewing him at Trump Tower, he told you he needed to go upstairs to deal with Afghanistan?
With the, quote, the Afghanistan is how he referred to it.
I mean, it's a remarkable experience. It's a remarkable book.
Do people realize how serious this is? Can you imagine? I've got to go deal with the Afghanistan upstairs. Sir, you're not president. No, I've got to go deal with it. And here's the saddest thing about this. I know some of you are thinking right now about Trump's father. I know that if I didn't say what I'm about to say, many of you would email me and they'd say, David, what Ramin Setoodeh is talking about is verbatim what was going on with Trump's father. Trump's father had dementia, Alzheimer's. And one of the things that was set up for Trump's father was he would go to his office. He would have a secretary, an assistant of some kind. He would have a phone and papers at his desk. And it was set up for him to think that he was still working. He would pick up the phone. He would talk to the secretary. He would shuffle the papers around. It was nonsense. He wasn't running the company at that point. He didn't have the capacity to run the company at that point. Trump thinking I'm going upstairs to deal with Afghanistan is strikingly similar to what was going on with Fred Trump later on in his life. So listen, this is extraordinarily serious stuff. So far, other than just blanket general denials, there isn't any serious refutation of what Ramin Setoodeh is saying. Not only that, these are such specific claims that I can't imagine him making them up in the way that some MAGA defenders are saying. So this all is very, very bad if Trump does become president. It's also bad in terms of what it says about Trump's health. But if there is any kind of glimmer of positivity or hope here, it's some new polling that looks very good for President Joe Biden. Let's talk about that next. For a long time, when I had a computer problem, I'd go on YouTube and Reddit and try to figure it out. And it seemed like the advice that is given 95% of the time is download Malwarebytes and that'll clean everything up for you. So I have been using Malwarebytes in real life for years, long before they became a sponsor, simply because Malwarebytes is way more than just an antivirus. It catches things other antivirus programs miss. With Malwarebytes, you have comprehensive real-time protection against malware, spyware, other malicious attacks that could jeopardize your privacy and personal data. It can detect and remove existing malware already on your devices with its best-in-class free scan, which is something traditional antiviruses lack. And now you can get identity theft protection as part of a bundle to keep your family's personal information safe with live monitoring, alerts, recovery assistance, and up to $1 million in identity theft protection. Malwarebytes has a special deal they're doing just for the David Pakman Show. You can get any Malwarebytes subscription for 50% off. That's half off at malwarebytes.com/Pakman. The link is down below.